The scent of oil and gasoline was, to Marcus Mac Jones, as comforting as the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. It clung to the very fabric of his small independent garage, Mac's Auto Repair, nestled in a working-class corner of the city. The sign, faded by years of sun and rain, still proudly declared its presence, a testament to Mac's enduring dedication. Inside, the concrete floor bore the indelible stains of countless repairs, yet every tool hung on its designated peg, every wrench gleamed, and every spare part was meticulously organized in labeled bins. It was a space that hummed with purpose, much like Mac himself. Mac was a man of quiet competence. His hands, though scarred and calloused from years of gripping wrenches and wrestling with stubborn engines, possessed a surprising dexterity, almost an artist's touch. He could diagnose a faltering engine by the faintest tremble in its idle, pinpoint a misalignment by the subtle pull of the steering wheel. To him, cars weren't just machines. They were intricate puzzles, each with its own unique language that he had learned to understand intimately. He lived alone in a modest apartment above his shop, his only true companions the rhythmic thrum of engines he brought back to life, and the occasional strains of classic jazz from his worn radio. Thanksgiving morning broke with a crisp, cool air that hinted at the coming winter. Mac's routine was as precise as the timing belt on a well-maintained engine. He rose with the sun, brewed a strong cup of coffee, and prepared a simple, solitary breakfast, scrambled eggs with a slice of toast. The gentle hum of Miles Davis filled the small kitchen, a soothing backdrop to his quiet start. He ate slowly, savoring each bite, his gaze occasionally drifting to a faded photograph on the counter, a picture of his parents, smiling, taken years ago, before illness and loss had fractured his small family. A faint pang of loneliness resonated within him, a familiar echo in the quiet space. He didn't dwell on it. Mac had long since learned to find contentment in his work, in the satisfaction of a job well done. Instead of saying he was isolated, the quiet emptiness of his small apartment spoke volumes. No bustling family preparing for a holiday feast. No cheerful chatter, just the gentle clinking of his fork against the ceramic plate. He'd hear the muffled sounds of families gathering in nearby homes, laughter, the distant clang of pots and pans, the murmur of excited children. And sometimes he'd pause, listening, a subtle, almost imperceptible yearning in his eyes. After breakfast, he cleaned his apartment with the same meticulous attention he applied to his shop, every surface wiped, every cushion straightened. He had planned a quiet day of rest, perhaps catching up on some reading or tinkering with a vintage carburetor he'd been restoring. He'd even prepared a small Thanksgiving meal for himself, a modest portion of turkey and stuffing, ready to be warmed. It wasn't a grand feast, but it was his, and it promised a peaceful, solitary holiday. As he finished up, the thought of his work drifted into his mind. Mac had an uncanny ability to connect with engines on an almost visceral level, sensing their ailments before diagnostics confirmed them. He possessed a kind of mechanical intuition, a sixth sense for the hidden flaws in metal and circuitry. He could tell just by the specific whine of a failing bearing, or the subtle unevenness in an engine's idle, precisely what was wrong. This wasn't something he'd learned from manuals. It was an innate talent, honed over decades of relentless practice, and an almost spiritual connection to the machines he worked on. He'd often joke that he could talk to cars, and in a way, he could. This unique talent was a quiet, almost mystical part of his skill set, a talent that only truly revealed itself when faced with the most perplexing mechanical mysteries. There was also a subtle hint of a past injustice, a quiet injustice that made him retreat from a larger, more prestigious opportunity earlier in his career. Years ago, he had been offered a high-profile position at a large corporate auto group, a chance to oversee multiple shops. But the company's insistence on cutting corners, on prioritizing profit over genuine repair, clashed with Mac's unshakable moral compass. He had witnessed unethical practices, felt the pressure to compromise his integrity, and in the end, he walked away, choosing his small, honest shop over corporate advancement. This quiet retreat, this refusal to compromise his principles, had reinforced his deep-seated integrity, making him the man he was today, a man who valued honest work and genuine help above all else. The crisp morning air turned colder, bringing with it a sense of quiet solitude. Mac was just about to settle into his planned day of rest when a jarring sound cut through the silence. The wheezing cough of a struggling engine, followed by a series of desperate, futile turns of a starter, and then an abrupt, dead silence. He walked to his shop's wide, greasy bay door and peered out. A faded old minivan, clearly well used, sat forlornly at the curb a block down, steam faintly rising from its hood. A young woman, her face etched with panic, was desperately trying to restart it, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. In the back seat, two small children, a boy and a girl, no older than 5 and 7, huddled together, their faces anxious, their eyes wide with fear and confusion. The girl clutched a worn teddy bear, and the boy was sniffling quietly. Mac felt a familiar tug in his gut. He knew that sound. It wasn't a minor issue. This was serious. The woman got out of the car, her movements jerky with frustration and despair. She ran her hands through her hair, her shoulders slumped. Mac could see her mouthing silent pleas, her face a mask of utter hopelessness. She looked utterly lost, stranded. He considered, for a fleeting moment, his warm, quiet apartment, his waiting meal, the peaceful day he had meticulously planned. It was Thanksgiving, a day for family, for rest. He was off the clock. A fleeting thought of "not my problem" crossed his mind, a whisper of self-preservation. But then he looked at the children, their small, vulnerable faces pressed against the window, and the raw desperation in the mother's eyes. He saw their cold, their hunger, their shattered holiday plans, and that was all it took. The pang of loneliness he felt earlier that morning now shifted into something else, a powerful, resonant empathy. He knew what it felt like to be alone, to feel helpless, to have hopes dashed. His own fractured past, the quiet injustices he had faced, had forged in him an unwavering commitment to helping others, especially when they were at their most vulnerable. His moral compass, long set true, pointed him towards action. Without a word, Mac turned back into his shop. He grabbed his worn toolkit, its familiar weight comforting in his hand. He pulled on his greasy work jacket, the scent of oil a second skin. His Thanksgiving dinner, his quiet plans, receded into the background, forgotten. He knew, with absolute certainty, that he couldn't leave them stranded. It simply wasn't in his nature. He walked down the block, his steps deliberate and unhurried, radiating an aura of quiet competence. The woman looked up as he approached, her eyes wide with a mix of surprise and apprehension. "Morning," Mac said, his voice calm and steady, a low rumble that instantly conveyed reassurance. He gestured towards her minivan. "Sounds like she gave out on you." The woman's shoulders sagged and she wrung her hands. "Oh, sir, yes. We were trying to get to my mother's for Thanksgiving dinner. She's not doing well, and this was our last chance to see her for the holiday." Her voice cracked, tears welling in her eyes. "And the children they're cold and we don't have much. I don't know what to do." Mac's gaze softened. He offered her a warm, gentle smile, the kind that had comforted countless worried car owners over the years. "Don't you worry, ma'am. Mac's Auto Repair is just up the street. Let's get you and the little ones somewhere warm." He then knelt beside the minivan's passenger door, bending down to make eye contact with the children. "Hey there, little troubleshooters," he said, his voice light. "Looks like your chariot needs a little nap, but we'll wake her up, nice and strong." He gave the girl clutching the teddy bear a reassuring wink, and the boy, still sniffling, offered a tiny, tentative smile. With gentle persuasion, he helped the woman guide the children out of the cold minivan and towards his shop. As they walked, he put a comforting hand on the mother's shoulder. "What's your name, ma'am?" Sarah Miller, and these are Lily and Tom." "Nice to meet you, Sarah, Lily, Tom. I'm Mac. We'll get this figured out." Back at his shop, he settled them in the small, worn waiting area, a space usually reserved for disgruntled customers, but now a haven of warmth. He offered them a thermos of hot cocoa he kept for cold mornings and a basket of stale but comforting crackers. The children, initially wary, slowly relaxed under his quiet, non-judgmental kindness, sipping the cocoa, their eyes occasionally glancing at the tools and machinery that filled the garage. Mac then walked back to the minivan. He opened the hood, his practiced eyes immediately scanning the engine. The subtle scent of burnt oil, metallic and acrid, hung in the air. He laid a hand on the cold metal, feeling for vibrations, listening intently. His intuitive ability, that sixth sense for ailing engines, immediately flared. This wasn't just a dead battery or a loose belt. This was deeper, more fundamental. He felt the subtle misalignment, the almost imperceptible weakness in a critical component, a rare failure that most mechanics would miss entirely. It was a premonition of mechanical doom, a fleeting thought about a rare, almost undetectable issue that only a truly exceptional mechanic would notice. He ran his hand over a specific part of the engine block, a faint tremor confirming his initial, almost psychic diagnosis. This was going to be a long, difficult day, a true test of his singular talent, but he knew, with chilling certainty, that he was the one who could fix it. And he wouldn't rest until he did. The diagnosis hit Mac with the familiar weight of a complex problem. He had confirmed his initial intuition. The minivan suffered from a catastrophic failure of its crankshaft position sensor, a crucial component that dictated engine timing. But it wasn't just a simple sensor failure. The housing around it had cracked in a precise, almost imperceptible way, leading to intermittent signal loss that mimicked other, less severe issues. This was a particularly insidious fault, difficult to diagnose even with the most advanced equipment, let alone by a mechanic working by feel and intuition on a holiday. It was a problem that would leave most shops stumped, likely leading to expensive, unnecessary repairs before they stumbled upon the true culprit. "It's going to be a tough one, Sarah," Max said, returning to the waiting area where Sarah, Lily, and Tom huddled, a fragile picture of hope and despair. "The engine's got a pretty rare issue. It's going to take some time, and it's not a cheap fix." Sarah's shoulders slumped, and her face crumpled. Lily, sensing her mother's distress, began to whimper, burying her face in her teddy bear. Tom, usually boisterous, was silently chewing on his lip, his eyes wide and fearful. "Oh no," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. We barely have enough for gas to get there. My mother, she's at the hospice, Mac. This was our only chance to see her for Thanksgiving. She's been so weak lately. I don't know if she has many holidays left." Her voice caught, and a single glistening tear tracked a path down her cheek. The words, "my mother, not doing well," resonated deeply with Mac, echoing his own past losses, the unsaid goodbyes. Mac felt the familiar tug of his own plans, the warmth of his prepared meal waiting in his quiet apartment upstairs. The lure of comfort, of an easy day off, was strong. He could recommend a larger shop, somewhere with more specialized diagnostics, somewhere that would be open on a holiday and charge them exorbitant rates. He could pass the buck, protect his own Thanksgiving. That was the logical, self-preserving choice. But then he looked at Sarah's desperate eyes, the raw vulnerability etched on her face. He saw Lily's trembling lip and Tom's quiet fear. This wasn't just about a broken car. It was about a family's hope, their last chance to connect with a dying loved one. It was a universal human need, amplified by the holiday. This wasn't a question of profit. It was a question of principle. His personal code, forged by a past that had shown him both the harshness of life and the power of unexpected kindness, demanded a different response. This was the point of no return. As Sarah reached into her worn wallet, pulling out a few crumpled bills and a handful of coins, her face burning with shame, Mac's decision solidified. He saw not just her financial struggle, but her genuine desperation, her profound need. "Mac, I truly appreciate you looking," she began, her voice cracking, "but I don't think we can afford it. Maybe there's a bus." "No," Mac said, his voice firm, cutting through her despair. He gently pushed her hand, and the money, back towards her. "No, Sarah. We're going to fix this, and you're not paying for my labor." Sarah blinked, her eyes wide with disbelief. But Mac, it's Thanksgiving, and it sounds like a big job. I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking," Mac replied, a small, resolute smile on his face. "I'm offering. This car is getting fixed. You're getting to your mother. Consider it my Thanksgiving contribution." He knew in that moment what this meant. It meant sacrificing his entire day, working alone, wrestling with a complex repair on a rare part. It meant missing his quiet meal, facing the cold, and pushing his skills to their absolute limit. But leaving them stranded, allowing their last holiday with their ailing mother to be ruined by a broken engine and empty pockets, was unthinkable. It went against everything he believed in. His personal commitment to their well-being became an irrevocable decision. The thought of his quiet Thanksgiving dinner, once a comfort, now seemed trivial in comparison to the profound urgency of their need. He walked back to the minivan, the cold steel of the engine a stark contrast to the warmth of his resolve. The crankshaft position sensor was located deep within the engine block, notoriously difficult to access. He knew he'd have to remove several major components just to get to it. This wasn't a simple swap-out. It was an intricate, time-consuming procedure that would require patience, precision, and a bit of his signature ingenuity. As he began to systematically dismantle parts of the engine, his mind raced, already planning the next steps. The component itself wouldn't be in stock anywhere, not on Thanksgiving. He'd have to find a way to improvise, to adapt. This was where his true skill, his almost mystical connection to machines, would be put to the test. He envisioned the problem, not as a static mechanical issue, but as a dynamic puzzle, the solution slowly unfolding in his mind. He worked with a quiet intensity, his movements economical and precise. He removed the air intake manifold, the serpentine belt, then the power steering pump, each component carefully laid out on a clean drop cloth. The scent of old oil and coolant filled the air, the familiar odors of his workspace. Sarah, watching him from the waiting area, felt a surge of bewildered gratitude. This man, a stranger, was giving up his holiday, his comfort, for them. It was an act of profound, unexpected kindness, a lifeline thrown just as they were drowning in despair. Lily and Tom, reassured by their mother's quiet relief and the steady rhythmic sounds of Mac's work, had fallen asleep, huddled together on the worn bench. Hours slipped by. The autumn light outside faded, replaced by the yellow glow of the streetlights. Mac's stomach rumbled, a polite reminder of his missed meal. The chill of the evening began to seep into the garage, but Mac barely noticed. He was entirely focused, his mind a whirlwind of schematics and mechanical possibilities. He finally reached the problematic sensor. As he extracted the broken housing, he saw the minute, almost invisible crack he had instinctively sensed. It was hairline, a barely perceptible fissure, but enough to disrupt the delicate electronic signal. He held it in his calloused hand, a small, seemingly insignificant piece of metal that held a family's hopes in its broken core. Now came the real challenge, finding a replacement. He had a small collection of salvaged parts in the back room, a dusty repository of components he'd saved over the years, often for reasons he couldn't articulate beyond a vague sense of just in case. To most, it looked like junk. To Mac, it was a treasure trove of potential. He walked into the dim back room, pulling a bare bulb string, casting long shadows. Boxes of old carburetors, rusted alternators, and discarded wiring harnesses filled the shelves. He ran his hand over a pile of serpentine belts, then along a row of old engine blocks. His fingers, guided by that uncanny intuition, settled on a small, obscure box. He opened it, revealing a single odd-looking component from a completely different make and model of car, salvaged from a defunct pickup truck years ago. It was a pressure sensor, utterly unrelated in function, but its housing, its intricate internal structure, held a peculiar resemblance to the broken crankshaft sensor. A spark of insight, almost a flash of genius, ignited in Mac's mind. This could work. He carried the salvaged part back to his workbench. This wasn't just about making it fit. It was about re-engineering, adapting, and precisely calibrating it to function as a crankshaft position sensor for a different engine. This was where his talent truly transcended mere mechanics and bordered on artistry. He began to meticulously modify the salvaged part, filing, grinding, and reshaping with custom-made tools he had forged himself. He worked with the precision of a surgeon, his brow furrowed in concentration. His hands, usually so steady, occasionally trembled with the strain of fine detail work. The minutes ticked by, stretching into hours. The cold seeped deeper into the shop. Sarah would occasionally check on him, offering quiet words of encouragement. her gratitude radiating like a small, flickering flame. The children, now awake, watched him with wide, curious eyes, sensing the gravity of his task. Mac felt the fatigue settle into his bones. His back ached, his eyes stung from staring at tiny components. The smell of metal dust and oil was overpowering. He felt the insidious whisper of doubt, the temptation to quit, to tell Sarah it was impossible. No one would blame you, Mac. It's Thanksgiving. It's too hard. But then he'd glance at the minivan, a hulking silhouette on the lift, a symbol of the family's shattered holiday hopes. He thought of Sarah's words. My mother. She's not doing well. He remembered the terror in Lily's and Tom's eyes, and the whisper of doubt would vanish, replaced by a renewed, resolute determination. He would not fail them. Not now. He was more than a mechanic. He was their last hope. The long, silent hours, the aching muscles, the mental strain, it was all worth it. For the chance to see them drive away, their holiday saved, their family reunited. He would finish this. He had to. The fluorescent lights of Mac's auto repair cast long, stark shadows as he worked, late into Thanksgiving afternoon. The shop, usually bustling with the low hum of diagnostic machines and the chatter of customers, was eerily quiet. Only the rhythmic clinking of wrenches, the soft whir of a power tool, and the occasional muted sniffle from the waiting area broke the silence. Sarah and her children, Lily and Tom, huddled on the worn bench, wrapped in blankets Mac had found in the dusty back room, their initial despair replaced by a fragile, almost bewildered hope as they watched the solitary mechanic. Mac was deep into the repair. The crankshaft position sensor was located in a notoriously difficult spot, requiring him to contort himself under the engine, his large frame fitting into surprisingly small spaces. He had removed the serpentine belt, the power steering pump, and even parts of the exhaust manifold just to gain access. Each bolt was stubborn, each connection tight, coated in years of grime and rust. It was meticulous, backbreaking work, the kind that tested not just a mechanic's skill, but their endurance and patience. He used unconventional techniques born of necessity and years of experience. Where other mechanics might use a powerful pneumatic wrench, Mac relied on a specialized slender ratchet, carefully feeling for the torque, knowing precisely how much pressure to apply without stripping the bolt. He maneuvered his hands into tight crevices, his fingers, despite their calluses, remarkably nimble. He used a small, flexible mirror attached to a telescoping rod to peer into blind spots, his keen eyes discerning every detail in the distorted reflection. This was ingenious problem-solving, born not from textbook knowledge alone, but from an almost intuitive understanding of mechanical physics and an intimate familiarity with the quirks of countless different engines. The true challenge, however, lay in the replacement part. As Mac had anticipated, a new crankshaft position sensor for this specific minivan was nowhere to be found on Thanksgiving Day. He had extracted the broken original, its hairline fracture a stark testament to the precision of his earlier diagnosis. Now, the improvised solution he'd envisioned in his back room would have to come to life. He retreated to the back room, a small, dusty space that most would consider a junkyard. It was a chaotic symphony of discarded parts, old tires, and forgotten tools. But to Mac, it was a library of potential. He pulled a bare light bulb cord, illuminating shelves crammed with everything from ancient carburetors to rusted alternators. He ran his hand over a pile of serpentine belts, then along a row of old engine blocks. His fingers, guided by that uncanny intuition, settled on a small, obscure box. He opened it, revealing a single, odd-looking component from a completely different make and model of car, salvaged from a defunct pickup truck years ago. It was a pressure sensor, utterly unrelated in function, but its housing, its intricate internal structure, held a peculiar resemblance to the broken crankshaft sensor. A spark of insight, almost a flash of genius, ignited in Mac's mind. This could work. He carried the salvaged part back to his workbench. This wasn't just about making it fit. It was about re-engineering, adapting, and precisely calibrating it to function as a crankshaft position sensor for a different engine. This was where his talent truly transcended mere mechanics and bordered on artistry. He carefully clamped the salvaged sensor in a vise, Then, with incredible dexterity and an almost artistic precision, began to meticulously modify and adapt it. He used a tiny diamond-tipped file to reshape its edges, a micro-drill to alter its internal bore, and a specialized soldering iron to rewire delicate internal circuits. He wasn't just fixing a car, he was custom crafting a crucial component from scratch, a feat few mechanics would even attempt, let alone accomplish, especially on a holiday. This was the unveiling of Mac's talents, a quiet display of genius under immense pressure. From the waiting area, Sarah watched him. Initially, she had felt only despair, then a desperate hope. Now, as she observed his focused intensity, his unusual array of custom tools, and the sheer dedication etched on his face, a dawning awe settled over her. She saw the meticulous care, the surgical precision, the way his hands moved with an almost mystical knowledge. Lily and Tom, initially restless, were now quiet, their small faces rapt with fascination as they watched Mac's silhouette against the glow of the worklight, a silent testament to his extraordinary concentration. They were the Noi Trogup in this moment, witnessing not just a mechanic at work, but a craftsman transforming a hopeless situation through sheer will and unparalleled skill. They couldn't understand the technicalities, but they understood the quiet heroism unfolding before their eyes. Meanwhile, the street outside was quiet, most shops closed for Thanksgiving. Only the flickering neon sign of Rex's Rapid Repair, a larger, flashier chain shop a few blocks away, pierced the gloom. Rex, the owner, a man whose ambition far outstripped his integrity, was stewing in his own empty shop. He'd seen Mac's lights on earlier, and now, as he drove by on his way home for a less-than-festive Thanksgiving dinner with his estranged family, he saw Mac's familiar beat-up truck still parked outside, indicating he was working late. Rex scoffed. "Typical Mac," he muttered to himself, shaking his head. "Always working on a holiday, probably desperate for work, or taking advantage of some poor soul. Foolish do-gooder." Rex, always dismissive of Mac's small shop and his unwavering commitment to honest, meticulous repairs, secretly resented Mac's reputation for integrity. Mac consistently refused to cut corners like Rex did, which often meant Mac's repairs lasted longer, earning him a quiet loyalty from customers that Rex, despite his aggressive marketing, couldn't replicate. Unknowingly, Rex had become an indirect Nyan Vat Joy Jiao, observing Mac's selfless act with disdain, fueling his existing envy. The hours wore on. Mac's improvised component slowly took shape, a testament to his unique blend of intuition and engineering prowess. He finally held it up, a perfect, albeit unconventional replacement, gleaming under the shop lights. He then began the painstaking process of reassembling the engine, working backward, each part fitting precisely, each bolt tightened to its exact specification. The next morning, Rex was at his shop early, not out of diligence, but out of a restless anxiety. He was still seething about Mac working on Thanksgiving, a perceived affront to his own, less dedicated approach. He overheard snippets of conversation filtering through the local mechanic network, hushed tones about a struggling family, and a miracle fix at Mac's. The whispers didn't have details, but they hinted at something extraordinary. Envy gnawed at Rex. He'd always tried to undermine Mac's reputation, spreading subtle slurs about his shop being old-fashioned or too slow. Now, this miracle fix threatened to elevate Mac even further in the community's regard. Rex couldn't stand it. He began to subtly spread malicious gossip through the local mechanic forums and among his contacts at parts suppliers. Heard Mac was working Thanksgiving, probably charging premium rates for a simple fix, trying to make a quick buck on a holiday. Or, heard he was stuck on a minivan all night. Must be incompetent if it takes him that long, probably just desperate for business. He even insinuated that Mac might be using unapproved parts or cutting corners. Rex's actions were subtle, designed to cast a shadow of doubt over Mac's integrity, to discredit him, and to turn a selfless act into a cynical transaction. This was the adversary's action, a covert attempt to chip away at Mac's hard-earned reputation before the full story could emerge. He wasn't directly confronting Mac, but quietly poisoning the well, hoping to undermine the very kindness Mac embodied. He couldn't imagine a mechanic working for free, so he assumed the worst, projecting his own avarice onto Mac's integrity. He believed that if he could just spread enough doubt, the community would turn on Mac, allowing Rex to finally dominate the local auto repair market. Meanwhile, oblivious to Rex's insidious whispers, Mac continued his work. The engine, with its modified and reinstalled component, was almost ready. The family, now more relaxed, watched him with an almost childlike faith. He was nearing the end of his grueling, self-imposed test, the true climax of his quiet battle against the broken machine and the ticking clock of a family's hope. The air in the shop, once filled with the scent of despair, now carried a faint, almost palpable aroma of impending triumph. The hands of the old clock above Mac's workbench ticked relentlessly, each second a whisper of the precious holiday fading into night. Outside, the neighborhood was silent, steeped in the warmth and laughter of Thanksgiving dinners. Inside Mac's auto repair, however, the air was cold, thick with the scent of oil and metal, and charged with a desperate, singular focus. The minivan, a silent, hulking silhouette on the lift, loomed as a symbol of the family's shattered hopes and Mac's ultimate challenge. This was his arena, a place of his mastery, but now a crucible where his skill, his integrity, and his sheer physical and mental endurance would be tested to their absolute limits. Mac was deep in the final, most precarious stage of the repair, the calibration and reinstallation of the custom-modified crankshaft position sensor. He worked in the harsh glow of the work lights, the fluorescent hum, a buzzing counterpoint to the quiet strains of jazz he'd left playing on his shop radio. His brow was furrowed in concentration, a thin sheen of sweat on his forehead despite the chill. He was entirely alone in the meticulous work. Sarah and her children, Lily and Tom, had fallen asleep on the worn waiting room bench, exhausted by the day's ordeal. Their quiet, trusting presence was a constant, unspoken pressure, a silent ticking clock. Every now and then, Sarah would stir, glance at him, and offer a soft, grateful sigh before drifting back to sleep. Her mother's declining health, the implicit urgency of their journey, weighed heavily on Mac. He knew every minute counted if they were to have any chance of reaching her before it was too late. This was the mounting pressure and time limit, an invisible but potent force pushing him harder. The specific modification of the salvaged part proved far trickier than anticipated. The salvaged component, while structurally similar, had minute variations in its electronic properties that needed to be precisely recalibrated for the minivan's engine control unit, ECU. It wasn't just about physically fitting the part, it was about making it think like the original. Mac had to use his specialized diagnostic software, connected to the minivan's computer, to read the ECU's parameters, then make tiny, almost imperceptible adjustments to the adapted sensor's internal wiring. Each adjustment was a gamble. One wrong move, one misplaced wire, and the delicate component could short-circuit, forcing him to start from scratch, assuming he even had another part to salvage. He was working with no margin for error, every action loaded with consequence. Doubt, an insidious, chilling whisper, began to creep into his mind. His stomach growled, a hollow ache reminding him he hadn't eaten since his meager breakfast. Fatigue gnawed at him, a dull throb in his temples, and a persistent ache in his lower back. "Why am I doing this?" the whisper asked. "No one will truly appreciate this level of sacrifice. You're giving up your holiday, your rest, for strangers. You could have sent them to Rex's. It's Thanksgiving, Mac. You should be with family." But he had no family to speak of, not in the way most people understood it. And he had already made his choice, an irrevocable decision that now defined his entire holiday. He thought of Rex, his flashy competitor, probably enjoying a lavish dinner, completely unaware of the intricate, selfless work happening in Mac's small shop. He knew Rex would never understand this kind of dedication, this quiet, uncompromising integrity that refused to cut corners or prioritize profit over genuine human need. The very thought of Rex's cynicism hardened Mac's resolve. The cold seeped deeper into the shop. Mac shivered but kept working. His hands, though skilled, sometimes trembled with exhaustion as he tried to solder a hair-thin wire. He had to redo a calibration step 3 times after minor errors, each repetition adding to his frustration and the relentless pressure of the clock. This was the true hero's isolation. He was completely alone, battling the complex machine, his own weariness, and the subtle negative rumors that Rex had begun to spread, rumors that questioned his competence and honesty. He knew he had to prove Rex wrong, not to Rex, but to himself, and to the sleeping family who trusted him implicitly. He pulled a worn rag from his pocket and wiped the grease from his brow, his breath misting in the cold air. The faint, sweet smell of burnt electronics signaled another failed attempt at recalibration. He slammed his hand lightly on the workbench in frustration, a rare outburst for the usually composed mechanic. He felt the weight of the family's hopes, the urgency of their journey pressing down on him. Lily's soft sigh from the waiting area, a small, innocent sound, spurred him on. He couldn't give up. He closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep, shuddering breath, trying to clear his mind. He visualized the electrical pathways, the precise timing signals, the delicate balance of the engine system. He had to find the exact point of connection, the perfect harmony between his improvised part and the minivan's sophisticated computer. It was like tuning a complex instrument, finding the perfect note amidst a cacophony of possibilities. He had to feel it, more than logically deduce it. This was where his uncanny ability, his almost visceral connection to engines, truly came into play. He picked up a smaller, more precise soldering iron, his hands moving with renewed focus. He remembered a peculiar engine hum he'd heard on a rare, high-end classic car he'd restored years ago, a specific resonance that indicated a perfectly aligned crankshaft. He tried to replicate that feeling, that subtle balance, in his current work, letting his intuition guide his hands. He worked through what would have been dinner time, through the quiet hours of evening, and into the deep of Thanksgiving night. The streetlights outside cast long, solitary shadows across the road. No one drove by. The world was asleep, celebrating. Mac was fighting. He returned to the minivan, the modified sensor carefully cradled in his palm. He navigated the tight space under the hood, his movements precise, almost surgical. He carefully positioned the sensor, listening for the soft click that indicated a perfect fit. He secured the housing, tightening the tiny bolts with painstaking care, then reconnected the wiring harness, double-checking every connection, every last detail. He even ran his hand over the main battery cable, ensuring it was firmly seated, a small, almost unconscious gesture that spoke volumes about his thoroughness. Finally, the engine was reassembled. The last bolt tightened, the last hose reconnected. Mac lowered the minivan from the lift, the hydraulic hiss filling the quiet shop. He stepped back, a profound sense of exhaustion washing over him. The minivan sat silently, an inert mass of steel and plastic. The true test was yet to come. The critical moment was at hand. He had pushed himself to the brink, used every ounce of his skill and intuition. Now it was up to the machine itself. He walked to the driver's side, his heart thumping a heavy rhythm against his ribs. He slid into the seat, the worn fabric cold beneath him. He glanced back at Sarah and the children, still asleep, their faces pale in the dim light. He whispered a silent prayer, a rare moment of overt spiritual connection for the pragmatic mechanic. He put the key in the ignition. He turned it. His hands, though calloused, trembled slightly. The sound that followed would determine everything. The silence in Mac's auto repair was absolute, thick with anticipation. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the distant drone of the city, even the soft breathing of the sleeping family on the bench seemed to amplify the moment. Mac sat in the driver's seat of the minivan, his hand poised on the ignition, his heart thumping a heavy rhythm against his ribs. He turned the key. The engine coughed. A hesitant, metallic wheeze scraped through the air, followed by a weak, rattling shudder. Then an abrupt, dead silence. A wave of crushing despair washed over Mac, cold and immediate. His shoulders slumped. All that work, all those hours, the intricate modifications, the freezing cold, the gnawing hunger, the profound exhaustion, all for nothing. He stared blankly at the dashboard, the small indicator lights mocking him with their inert glow. The image of Sarah's hopeful, desperate face flashed in his mind, followed by the memory of Lily's tear-filled eyes. He had failed them. He had promised, and he had failed. He felt the prick of bitter disappointment, not just for the family, but for himself. He had pushed his skills to their absolute limit, poured every ounce of his intuitive genius into this repair, and still, it wasn't enough. The whisper of doubt, so insidious before, now screamed in his head. "You're not good enough, Mac. You're just a small-time mechanic. You can't pull off miracles." This was the breathless moment, the precipice of defeat, where everything seemed lost. Mac closed his eyes, taking a ragged, shuddering breath. He felt the weight of the minivan, the symbol of so much broken hope. He rubbed his temples, trying to clear the fog of fatigue and failure. "What did I miss?" he thought, desperately retracing every step of the complex repair. His gaze fell to the floor near the pedals. Something seemed subtly off. He leaned down, his eyes straining in the dim light, and then he saw it, a single, almost invisible wire leading from the ignition module. In his utter exhaustion during the final reassembly, he had inadvertently dislodged it by a hair's breadth while securing the footwell panel. It wasn't completely disconnected, just enough to prevent the full electrical signal from reaching the modified sensor. It was a minuscule error, easily overlooked, especially after hours of intense, precise work. A jolt of renewed hope, sharp and exhilarating, shot through him. It wasn't the sensor. It wasn't his modification. It was a simple human error, born of sheer fatigue. Mac carefully reached down, his fingers surprisingly steady despite the tremors of exhaustion. With a gentle, deliberate motion, he clicked the wire firmly back into its connector. He felt a faint, satisfying snick. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible adjustment, yet he knew it was everything. This was the turning point. He sat back up, his heart pounding with renewed intensity. He took another deep breath, his hands gripping the steering wheel. He turned the key again. This time, the minivan's engine roared to life. Not a cough, not a sputter, but a strong, steady purr, a powerful, even hum that vibrated through the chassis. It was a beautiful sound, the symphony of a perfectly aligned, fully functioning engine. The dashboard lights glowed a vibrant green, alive and responsive. The smell of gasoline and oil now mixed with the sweet, metallic scent of a healthy engine, humming with newfound power. Mac let out a ragged, trembling sigh of relief, a profound sense of exhaustion and elation washing over him. A small, triumphant smile touched his lips. He had done it. He had truly done it. The sudden roar of the engine startled Sarah awake. Her eyes flew open, wide with alarm, then slowly adjusted to the sight of Mac in the driver's seat. Lily and Tom, roused from their sleep, blinked groggily. Then their eyes widened as they heard the steady thrum of the minivan. Sarah gasped, a hand flying to her mouth. Tears, no longer of despair but of overwhelming relief and gratitude, streamed down her face. She rushed forward, abandoning her blankets, and threw her arms around Mac in a heartfelt, bone-crushing embrace. "You did it, Mac! You truly did it!" she sobbed, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you. Thank you, thank you!" Lily and Tom, now fully awake and understanding, shrieked with joy. They scrambled off the bench, running towards the minivan, their small faces alight with unbridled excitement. "The car works!" Tom cried, jumping up and down. "We can go see Grandma!" Lily clapped her hands, her teddy bear forgotten for a moment. The scene was a flurry of genuine, unrestrained happiness, a stark contrast to the despair that had filled the shop just moments before. Sarah, still tearful, pulled away, rummaging in her worn wallet. She pulled out the few crumpled bills and coins she had. "Please, Mac," she insisted, pressing the meager sum into his hand. "It's not much, but please take it. You worked all night. It's Thanksgiving." Mac gently pushed her hand and the money back towards her. He met her gaze, his eyes warm and sincere. "No, Sarah. Consider it a gift. Just get to your mother. That's all the payment I need." Sarah's eyes brimmed over once more, but this time it was with a profound respect. She knew what this truly meant, a self-sacrifice that went beyond professional duty. She hugged him once more, then gathered her beaming children. Lily, usually shy, reached out and hugged Mac's leg tightly before her mother pulled her towards the minivan. Tom waved enthusiastically from the back seat. As Sarah started the engine, it purred beautifully, a testament to Mac's quiet miracle. She rolled down the window. "We'll never forget this, Mac," she called out, her voice filled with a promise. "Happy Thanksgiving." The minivan pulled away, its taillights receding into the darkness of the Thanksgiving night, the engine humming smoothly. Mac watched until they were out of sight, a profound sense of accomplishment and peace settling over him. He was utterly exhausted, but the exhaustion was sweet, infused with the warmth of a job truly well done, a family truly helped. Unbeknownst to Mac, the story of his Thanksgiving miracle was already starting to spread. The immediate vindication came from Sarah and her children, their profound gratitude a powerful balm for his soul. But the ripple effect began almost immediately within the small, local network of other mechanics. Rex, Mac's envious competitor, was fuming the next morning. His attempts to spread malicious gossip about Mac's competence and avarice had barely registered with the local community. But then a different kind of rumor started to circulate. The family, overjoyed, had called various relatives and friends from the hospice, recounting the miraculous Thanksgiving night rescue. The story, embellished slightly with each retelling, began to circulate through neighborhood groups, online forums, and eventually the local news channels. It wasn't just that Mac fixed the car. It was that he fixed a rare, impossible problem on Thanksgiving for no charge. The whispers of doubt about Mac that Rex had tried to sow were drowned out by a rising chorus of admiration. Other mechanics, who had dismissed Mac's small shop or considered him overly old-fashioned, heard about the unconventional fix, the ingenuity involved. They recognized the difficulty of the repair and the sheer skill it would take to adapt a completely unrelated part. The initial skepticism among some of his peers turned into murmurs of respect and then growing awe. He what? He used that part? Impossible, followed by, no one else could have done that. They began to see Mac not as a fool, but as a legend in the making, a master craftsman whose integrity and skill were simply unmatched. The community, always valuing honesty and hard work, rallied around him, quietly celebrating his profound kindness. The reactions of the witnesses, initially the family, then the wider community of appreciative locals and admiring peers, transformed from doubt to respect, and finally, a surge of awe. Mac had not only fixed an engine, he had ignited a quiet revolution of respect. The minivan's taillights vanished into the cold Thanksgiving night, leaving Mac alone in the sudden, profound silence of his garage. He stood for a long moment, the scent of fresh oil and exhaust mingling with the lingering warmth of gratitude. The utter exhaustion that had been held at bay by adrenaline now crashed over him, but it was a sweet, satisfying fatigue, completely devoid of the usual weariness that came with difficult jobs. He had done it. He had not only fixed a complex mechanical issue, but had, in his own quiet way, mended a family's shattered holiday and given them a lifeline of hope. The immediate vindication from Sarah's heartfelt embrace and the children's joyous shrieks was enough for Mac. He sought no further recognition. However, the ripples of his selfless act began to spread through the community with surprising speed and force. Rex, Mac's flashier competitor, was the first to feel the brunt of it. He had spent the morning after Thanksgiving, and indeed the entire holiday weekend, subtly disseminating his carefully crafted gossip through the local mechanic network. He insinuated that Mac was either desperate for work, incompetent for taking so long, or worse, had overcharged the family. He wanted to cast a shadow on Mac's integrity, to paint him as opportunistic, not altruistic. But Rex had fundamentally misunderstood the power of genuine kindness in a tight-knit community. The story of Mac's Thanksgiving miracle didn't just circulate. It went viral, locally speaking. Sarah, overwhelmed with gratitude, had called every relative and friend from her mother's hospice, recounting the miraculous rescue. The children, Lily and Tom, excitedly told anyone who would listen about the kind mechanic who woke up their car on Thanksgiving so they could see Grandma. The local news, always on the lookout for feel-good stories during the holidays, picked up the narrative. A small human interest piece aired that week, showing footage of Mac's unassuming shop, accompanied by an anonymous voiceover praising his dedication. The narrative of a struggling family, a complex, free repair, and a selfless mechanic who gave up his holiday resonated deeply with people. Suddenly, Rex's malicious whispers and attempts to discredit Mac backfired spectacularly. Customers who heard about Mac's integrity, contrasting it with Rex's rumored greed and aggressive upselling tactics, began to flock to Mac's auto repair. Rex's shop, Rex's Rapid Repair, which had thrived on volume and flashy advertising, experienced a noticeable decline in business. Potential customers, hearing the story, actively chose to bypass Rex's brightly lit, modern garage for Mac's older, more modest, but now legendary establishment. Rex's reputation, already shaky due to his corner-cutting practices, was irrevocably damaged by his own petty jealousy and attempt to undermine true kindness. His avarice, which had fueled his malicious actions, led directly to his financial and reputational decline. It was a clear, proportional fall of the adversary. The small network of local mechanics, initially swayed by Rex's gossip or simply indifferent to Mac, also began to show a shift. At first, they were simply curious. Then, as the details of Mac's improvised crankshaft sensor and the complex calibration became known, curiosity morphed into genuine admiration. They started visiting his shop, not as competitors, but as fellow craftsmen. "Mac, is it true you re-engineered a pressure sensor from a '98 pickup to make it work?" One grizzled veteran mechanic asked, his eyes wide with a mix of skepticism and awe. Mac, humble as ever, just shrugged. "Had to make it work, no other way." "Incredible," another murmured, shaking his head. "No one else would have even thought of it, let alone pulled it off on Thanksgiving for free." We heard some things, Mac." Rex was talking. Mac simply nodded, his gaze steady. He didn't need to defend himself. His work and the community's response spoke volumes. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, these mechanics began to offer a different kind of support. They started sending him complex jobs they couldn't handle, acknowledging his superior talent and his unwavering ethical approach. They asked for his advice on obscure engine issues. Some even came by just to watch him work, learning from his methodical approach and his uncanny intuition. They had underestimated him, and now they saw him not just as a competitor, but as a respected figure, a master in their trade. Their quiet acknowledgement, their newfound respect, was their collective act of repentance of the misunderstood, transforming them from indifferent rivals to a supportive network. The story of Mac's Thanksgiving miracle continued to gain momentum. Articles were written in local newspapers, and news segments aired on regional television. Mac's Auto Repair, once a struggling neighborhood shop, was overwhelmed with business. The phone rang off the hook. Cars lined the street outside his garage, awaiting his expert touch. The influx of work presented a new, exciting challenge. Mac had to expand. He bought the vacant lot next door, built a new, larger bay, and installed modern diagnostic equipment he'd only dreamed of. Most significantly, he had to hire help. He brought in 2 young, eager apprentices from the community, both from disadvantaged backgrounds, who possessed a raw talent and a hunger to learn. He dedicated hours to teaching them not just the mechanics of cars, but the ethics of honest work, the importance of treating every customer with respect, and the profound satisfaction of truly helping someone. This new success allowed him to not only thrive, but to also start a community outreach program, offering discounted repairs for low-income families and free training for aspiring mechanics. It was a long-held dream, now made possible by his quiet act of selflessness. This was his meaningful new opportunity, a chance to scale his individual compassion into a broader, more impactful mission. He was no longer just fixing cars. He was building a legacy of skill, integrity, and community service. A few weeks later, after the initial whirlwind of success had settled into a steady hum of productivity, Mac stood in his now bustling, expanded shop. The air was filled with the cheerful clang of tools, the scent of fresh coffee, and the lively chatter of his apprentices. Ms. Jenkins, a long-time, loyal customer who had quietly supported him for years, walked in, not for a repair, but with a warm, homemade apple pie, a gesture of quiet gratitude for all he had done for the community. They found a quiet corner in his newly renovated office, the glass wall offering a panoramic view of the thriving garage. "It feels surreal, doesn't it, Mac?" Ms. Jenkins murmured, savoring a slice of pie. "All those years, you just kept your head down, doing honest work, never asking for praise. And now, look at all this. It's magnificent." Mac, looking at the thriving shop, at his apprentices diligently working, a faint smile on his lips, nodded slowly. "It does. Sometimes I still think about that night. about giving up, about just sending them away. He paused, a thoughtful expression on his face. But something inside wouldn't let me, just couldn't. This was their reflective dialogue, a quiet moment to process the emotional landscape they had traversed. Ms. Jenkins simply smiled, her eyes kind. You always had that heart, Mac, a good, strong one. Now the world just finally sees it. And it needed to. She reached across the table and patted his hand gently. You didn't just fix a minivan that night, Mac. You started something bigger, something really good. Mac looked out at his transformed shop, at the smiling faces of his apprentices, at the steady stream of grateful customers. The quiet, solitary existence he had once known was gone, replaced by a vibrant, interconnected life. The initial pang of loneliness that had haunted his Thanksgiving morning was long gone, replaced by a deep, abiding sense of purpose and connection. The resolution was not just the end of a legal battle, but the beginning of a powerful, hopeful new chapter. He was no longer just Mac, the mechanic. He was Mac, the community cornerstone, the quiet hero, whose simple act of kindness had blossomed into a profound legacy. 10 years later, the warm glow of the afternoon sun streamed through the expansive glass panels of the Mac's Auto and Community Hub, illuminating a bustling space that hummed with purpose. What was once Mac's small, aging garage had transformed into a thriving, state-of-the-art facility, a cornerstone of the revitalized neighborhood. The scent of fresh oil still lingered, but now it mingled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee from the community lounge, and the faint, sweet smell of sawdust from the new vocational training workshops. Dr. Marcus Mac Jones, though no longer formally a doctor in the traditional sense, moved through the hub with an air of quiet contentment. His hair, now almost entirely silver, gleamed under the shop lights, and the lines around his eyes were deeper, etched by years of dedicated work and countless acts of kindness. He was still hands-on, often found under a hood, his movements as precise and intuitive as ever. But he spent more of his time mentoring the dozens of young mechanics who filled his expanded bays. The Mac's Auto and Community Hub was more than just a repair shop. It housed a nationally recognized apprenticeship program for aspiring mechanics, drawing students from diverse, often disadvantaged, backgrounds. Mac's methodologies, once considered unconventional, were now taught as the gold standard for intuitive diagnostics and ethical repair. He had integrated the lessons learned from that Thanksgiving night into the very fabric of his enterprise, ensuring that every repair was done with integrity and every interaction was imbued with genuine care. His reputation had grown exponentially. He was now a respected voice in vocational training and community development, often invited to speak at conferences and advise on new initiatives. The old, aching loneliness that had once defined his small apartment above the shop had long since faded. His home, a larger, cozier space on the second floor of the new hub, often resonated with the laughter of his apprentices during impromptu potlucks, or the animated chatter of community members utilizing the new lounge and learning spaces. He had found a profound, expanded sense of family, not by blood, but by shared purpose and mutual respect. This was his new, fulfilling reality. One crisp autumn afternoon, as the leaves outside painted the streets in hues of amber and gold, Mac was meticulously guiding a young apprentice through the intricacies of a complex transmission rebuild. A sleek, black electric SUV, a model of modern engineering, pulled silently into the main bay. Its quiet arrival was almost imperceptible over the cheerful clamor of the busy shop. A tall, elegantly dressed young woman with an air of quiet determination stepped out of the driver's seat. Her posture was confident, her movements graceful. As she turned, her eyes met Mac's. They were dark, intelligent, and held a remarkably familiar warmth that instantly tugged at something deep within him. A flicker of recognition, a soft tremor of memory, passed through Mac. She walked towards him, a gentle smile gracing her lips. "Hello, Mac," she said, her voice clear and resonant, carrying a faint echo of a long-ago whisper. "Do you remember me?" Mac felt a lump form in his throat. It was Lily, the little girl from the minivan who had huddled with her teddy bear and watched him work all those years ago. She was no longer a frightened child, but a poised, accomplished woman. He saw the faint, almost imperceptible scar above her left eyebrow, a tiny mark from a childhood fall, a detail that cemented her identity in his memory. "Lily," he breathed, his voice thick with emotion, disbelief and profound joy swirling within him. He hadn't seen her in 10 years, had only received sporadic updates from Sarah via Ms. Jenkins, knowing that the family had moved away to be closer to Sarah's extended relatives. He had purposely given them space, allowing them to forge their new, healthy life, free from the spotlight of his actions. Lily smiled, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "It's been a long time, Mac." "Too long," he agreed, his voice still a little shaky. He gestured towards a quiet corner of the lounge area. "Come, tell me everything." They sat, surrounded by the comfortable sounds of the bustling hub, the distant hum of machinery, the murmur of conversation, the laughter of children attending an after-school workshop. Lily, now a successful architect and urban planner, recounted her journey. She spoke of how that Thanksgiving night, the raw fear of being stranded, the despair of almost missing her grandmother's last holiday, had been utterly transformed by Mac's selfless act. "You didn't just fix our car, Mac," she explained, her voice earnest. "You gave us hope. You showed us that there was still profound kindness in the world, even when things felt utterly broken. That night, seeing you work, seeing your dedication, it truly shaped me." She had pursued her passion for creating spaces, but with a unique focus, community-driven, resilient design. Her portfolio included innovative designs for affordable housing, sustainable community centers, and most recently, a series of trauma-informed healing spaces for disadvantaged youth. She was a rising star in her field, celebrated not just for her aesthetic vision, but for her deep understanding of human need and social impact. She had channeled her past vulnerability into powerful, tangible acts of creation, fulfilling the profound act of paying it forward. "My latest project," Lily explained, pulling out a sleek tablet and showing him stunning architectural renderings, "is a large-scale initiative to revitalize neglected urban areas. We're building schools, green spaces, and community hubs designed to be truly empowering for families. Places where children can thrive, where parents can find support, where everyone feels safe and valued." She paused, her gaze meeting his, a deep sincerity in her eyes. "And it's because of you, Mac, that I've dedicated my career to this. Your shop that night for us was more than just a garage. It was a sanctuary. It was proof that one person's compassion can change everything. My firm, and I personally, want to do something to honor that." She then revealed the true purpose of her visit, a gesture that brought tears to Mac's eyes. "I'm here to establish the Mac's Legacy Fund for Community Mechanics. It will be a perpetual endowment, providing full scholarships and living stipends for deserving young people to attend your apprenticeship program here. We want to ensure that your vision, your mentorship, can reach even more individuals who might otherwise never have this opportunity. And we want to support your community outreach programs, ensuring that no family in this city is ever stranded because they can't afford a repair." Mac listened, utterly overwhelmed. It was more than a gift. It was a continuation of his life's work, a powerful validation of every sacrifice, every late night. Lily wasn't just acknowledging his past. She was investing in his future, amplifying his impact far beyond what he could have achieved alone. "Lily," Mac managed, his voice thick with emotion, You don't owe me anything. Your success, your incredible work, that is more than enough." "No," she insisted, her gaze firm and sincere. "I owe you everything, Mac. That night, you chose us. You chose compassion over comfort. You gave me and my family a second chance. And the best way I know how to thank you is to help you give that same second chance to others." She looked around the thriving hub, a look of immense satisfaction on her face. "You planted a seed of hope in me, Mac. And now, I want to help you cultivate a whole forest." They spent the rest of the afternoon talking, not just about the fund, but about life, about resilience, about the profound ripple effects of kindness. Mac saw not just the successful architect in Lily, but the deep empathy, the quiet strength, and the unwavering spirit of the little girl who had once clung to her teddy bear in the cold back of a minivan. It was a beautiful testament to the human spirit's capacity to overcome profound adversity and to transform pain into purpose. The sun began to set, casting long, golden shadows across the bustling hub, As Lily prepared to leave, she paused at the wide glass wall overlooking the street. "You know, Mac," she said, her voice soft, "the first major community project I designed, after graduating, was a new bus terminal and urban park complex. It was built just a few miles from here, near where our minivan broke down that Thanksgiving." She pointed to a sleek, modern structure visible in the distance, its new lights beginning to flicker on against the darkening sky. "It's a place of connection, of safe passage. And it started with you, fixing one broken connection, one stranded family." Mac walked to the glass wall and stood beside her, his gaze following her finger to the illuminated building. Its clean lines and welcoming lights shone brightly, a beacon against the twilight. It was a tangible monument to Lily's resilience, to her profound ability to transform suffering into creation. And in its luminescence, in the hum of his own thriving hub, Mac saw the powerful, enduring legacy of his own quiet courage. He smiled, a genuine, profound smile that encompassed not just the visible building, but the unseen lives it would touch, the hope it would inspire. It was the final symbolic image, a perfect encapsulation of their story. A quiet man's deep compassion had ignited a spark in a broken child, and that spark had, years later, become a blazing light, illuminating the path for countless others. His second spring was not just a season of personal flourishing, but a continuous spring of renewal, of hope, and of relentless, compassionate service. The story had come full circle, ending not with an end, but with a vibrant, enduring beginning. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies, and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming stories.